The fall Naomi Parker stared at the potted succulent on her desk, the only item she had been allowed to keep from her office. The cardboard box containing 5 years of her professional life sat pathetically by her feet in the lobby of Helix Innovations, the security guard's eyes boring into her back. "Ms. Parker, I need you to surrender your access card," said Vivian from HR, her voice clinically detached. The woman who had recruited Naomi with enthusiastic promises now couldn't meet her gaze. "There must be some mistake," Naomi said, her voice barely audible. "I never accessed those client files. I wouldn't even know how to—" "The digital footprint was traced to your terminal," Vivian interrupted. "The evidence is conclusive. You're fortunate we're not pursuing legal action. The accusation, leaking confidential data to a competitor, was absurd. But the termination was effective immediately, with no severance. As a single mother to 8-year-old Zoe, this wasn't just a career setback. It was catastrophic." Outside, autumn rain plastered Naomi's blouse to her skin. She hadn't even been allowed to retrieve her umbrella. Her phone buzzed. Zoe's after-school program, wondering why she was late for pickup. Reality crashed down. How would she pay rent next month? How would she explain this to her daughter? 3 job interviews over the next week ended the same way. "Your qualifications are impressive, but we've had some concerns about your departure from Helix." The industry was small, and rumors traveled fast. By Friday, Naomi was sitting in her apartment's kitchenette, calculator in hand, working out how long her meager savings would last. "Mommy, why are you home all the time now?" Zoe asked, her small face framed by unruly curls as she clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit. "I'm taking a little break from work," Naomi managed, forcing a smile. "We get to have more time together. Isn't that nice?" That night, after Zoe fell asleep, Naomi wrote applications until her vision blurred. Her phone pinged with a text from her former colleague, Devin. "Everyone knows Marcel was responsible. He set you up to cover his mistakes. Not fair. Marcel Wong, the VP's nephew, brought in 6 months ago despite his lack of qualifications. He'd made numerous errors that Naomi had quietly corrected. The last time he'd apparently decided correction wasn't necessary. By week 3, Naomi had pawned her grandmother's earrings to cover Zoe's dance class fees. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She applied to cashier positions at the supermarket where she used to shop for organic produce. "You're overqualified," the manager said kindly. "And you'll leave as soon as something better comes along." Naomi wanted to scream that nothing better was coming along, that her career was in ashes, that her daughter had started asking why they only ate pasta now. That evening, walking home from another failed interview, Naomi passed the gleaming Helix Tower. Through the rain-streaked windows, she caught a glimpse of a solitary figure on the top floor, Ethan Frost, the reclusive founder who had built the company from nothing but rarely appeared in person. They'd never met. He was more myth than man to most employees. She hadn't noticed she'd stopped walking until a security guard approached. "Ma'am, you can't loiter here." Naomi nodded and turned away. Unaware that from 50 stories up, Ethan Frost was watching. A personnel file open on his desk, her personnel file, with a single question scrawled in the margin. Why? The investigation. Ethan Frost tapped his fountain pen against the glass desk, creating a metronome-like rhythm that echoed through his minimalist office. The personnel file before him contained inconsistencies that nagged at his analytical mind. Naomi Parker's termination documentation didn't align with her impeccable 5-year performance record. "Harrison, walk me through this again," Ethan said to his chief of security, who stood uncomfortably by the window. "Parker was terminated for leaking the Meridian proposal?" "Yes, sir. IT traced the breach to her terminal. And the investigation lasted exactly..." Ethan checked the timestamp. 4 hours from detection to termination? Harrison shifted his weight. "Mr. Wong insisted on expediting the process." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Marcel Wong, his COO's nephew, had been fast-tracked into management despite Ethan's reservations. Nepotism was contrary to Helix's meritocratic culture, but Ethan had been preoccupied with the European expansion and had conceded to his COO's pressure. "Show me the digital evidence." 3 days later, Ethan sat in a nondescript sedan across from Naomi's apartment building. The investigation had revealed that someone had indeed accessed the files from Naomi's terminal, but timestamp analysis showed she was presenting in the Newton conference room at that exact time. The access had occurred using her credentials while she was documented elsewhere. Through the car window, he watched Naomi emerge with a small girl, her daughter presumably. The child wore a backpack nearly as large as she was, And despite everything, Naomi was smiling down at her, straightening a crooked hair clip with gentle fingers. "She's selling her furniture," reported Diane, his most discreet investigator. "The building manager says she's 2 weeks late on rent. She's applied for 27 positions since termination. No offers." Ethan felt something unfamiliar: guilt. He had built Helix from his dorm room code into a tech empire, but had grown increasingly detached from its daily operations. While he'd retreated into algorithms and innovations, he'd allowed a culture to develop where someone like Naomi could be discarded without proper investigation. "The actual breach originated from Marcel Wong's device," Diane continued. "He used Parker's credentials when she stepped away for that presentation. Based on email records, he was trying to cover up his own mistake. He had already leaked sensitive information to a college friend at Rival Tech during a drunken happy hour. He framed Parker to divert attention. Ethan had seen enough. Prepare a full report by morning, and find out everything about Ms. Parker's current situation." The next day, Ethan called an emergency board meeting. Marcel Wong was terminated, escorted from the building by the same security guards who had removed Naomi. His uncle, the COO, submitted his resignation rather than face an ethics investigation, but fixing the company wasn't enough. The image of Naomi straightening her daughter's hair clip haunted him. A woman who maintained such dignity in crisis deserved more than just institutional justice. "Sir, what do you want to do about Ms. Parker?" Harrison asked after the boardroom cleared. Ethan stared out at the cityscape, the empire he had built but somehow lost connection with. "Something I should have done 3 weeks ago. The right thing." The olive branch Naomi stared at the crisp envelope that had arrived by courier. The Helix logo embossed on its surface made her stomach clench. Probably a formal cease and desist, or some legal waiver they wanted her to sign. With trembling fingers, she opened it, finding a brief note requesting her presence at the downtown Larkspur Hotel for a job interview. Not with Helix, but with Ethan Frost personally, her first instinct was to tear it up. The humiliation of her firing still burned fresh. But Zoe had developed a persistent cough, and the pediatrician had gently suggested tests that Naomi's emergency health insurance wouldn't cover. The Larkspur's hushed elegance made Naomi acutely aware of her one presentable outfit, now slightly too loose after weeks of economizing on groceries. She was directed to a private dining room where, to her shock, Ethan Frost sat alone. "Ms. Parker, thank you for coming." His voice was softer than she'd expected from the tech wunderkind whose reputation bordered on ruthless. "I owe you an apology." For 30 minutes, he detailed his investigation, Marcel's deception, and the systemic failures that had allowed her termination. Naomi listened in stunned silence. "We were wrong," he concluded. "I was wrong. Why are you telling me this?" Naomi finally asked. "Is this to prevent a lawsuit?" Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "No, this is about correction. I'd like to offer you your position back." "My position is already filled," she said flatly. "I'm offering you Director of Client Relations. It's what you should have been promoted to last year, according to your performance reviews." Naomi nearly laughed. "You expect me to return to a company that discarded me without a second thought?" "No," Ethan said simply. "I expect nothing. But I am asking you to consider helping me fix what's broken at Helix, starting with how we treat our people." She studied him, this enigmatic billionaire who had built an empire but was now sitting across from her with something like genuine regret. The offer was beyond generous. The practical part of her brain screamed to accept immediately. Instead, she said, "I need time to think." He nodded. "Of course. And regardless of your decision, this is yours." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check, 6 months' salary as compensation. "I don't want your guilt money," she began. "It's not guilt, Miss Parker. It's restitution. Your career was damaged. Your reputation was smeared. This doesn't fix that, but it might help with immediate concerns while you consider my offer." That night, after using a portion of the check for Zoe's medical tests, Naomi lay awake considering her options. Return to Helix under a cloud, with colleagues whispering about her fall and rise. Start fresh somewhere else, using the money as a cushion? The next morning, she called the number Ethan had provided. "I'll accept the position," she said when he answered, "under 2 conditions. First, I report directly to you, not through the management structure that failed me. Second, I want to implement a formal review process for all terminations." The pause on the line made her heart race. Was she pushing too far? Done, he said finally. When can you start? The reconstruction. The corner office on the 48th floor intimidated Naomi. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic city views, and the desk, a slab of polished walnut, dwarfed her previous workstation. A handwritten note sat propped against a new computer. The view helps with perspective. Welcome back. EF returning to Helix as a director brought unexpected challenges. Former peers now reported to her, and their reactions ranged from genuine happiness to thinly veiled resentment. Vivian from HR avoided eye contact in hallways. Ethan proved surprisingly accessible. Their weekly meetings to restructure the client relations department evolved from stiffly formal to genuinely collaborative. He listened to her ideas with an intensity that was both flattering and unnerving. You've completely reorganized the Thompson account, he noted, reviewing her proposal. This approach addresses issues they've had for years but never articulated. Sometimes clients don't know what they need until you show them, Naomi replied. Something shifted in their dynamic that day, mutual professional respect blooming into genuine admiration. At home, changes were equally profound. They had moved to a brighter apartment closer to Zoe's school. Her daughter's health had improved, and with it, her exuberance. One evening, as Naomi reviewed quarterly projections, Zoe peered over her shoulder. Is that your boss? She asked, pointing to an email from Ethan. Yes, that's Mr. Frost. He looks sad in his pictures, Zoe observed with a child's directness. The comment lingered with Naomi. The next day, she noticed the truth in it, the isolation that seemed to surround Ethan despite his success. During their meeting, she found herself asking about the company's origins, something personal rather than procedural. Surprise flashed across his face before he shared the story of coding the original algorithm in his college dorm after his mother's medical misdiagnosis had nearly killed her. Helix was supposed to make systems more human, he said, not less. That conversation marked another shift. Their professional relationship developed a personal dimension, subtle but undeniable. She began to understand the man behind the empire, his brilliance and his blind spots. Months passed. Naomi's client retention initiative became company-wide policy. Ethan began attending company events he had previously avoided. Rumors circulated about his increased presence in the office coinciding with their meetings. One evening, working late on the Westmoreland proposal, they ordered dinner to her office. Casual conversation drifted to family. Zoe's science project won first place, Naomi mentioned proudly. That's the solar system diorama you were helping with? The fact that he remembered such a detail startled her. More surprising was her realization that she had begun sharing personal aspects of her life with him, and he had been listening. When he helped her into her coat later, his hand lingered briefly on her shoulder. The moment stretched between them, laden with unspoken possibility. Naomi, he began, then stopped himself. It's late. Your car is waiting downstairs, she nodded, suddenly aware of the complex waters they were navigating. Employer and employee, man and woman, two people carrying their own histories of caution. As she left, she realized something had fundamentally changed. This was no longer just about rebuilding her career or his company. They were rebuilding themselves in each other's presence. The new beginning spring transformed the city, mirroring the changes at Helix. Under Naomi's influence, the company had implemented a transparent review system and revitalized client relationships. Employee retention had improved dramatically. Ethan had emerged from his isolation, becoming a visible presence throughout the offices. Their professional partnership had flourished, but the unspoken personal connection remained carefully contained within professional boundaries until the night of the Meridian contract celebration. The rooftop event marked Helix's biggest client acquisition of the year, largely due to Naomi's innovative approach. Champagne flowed, and even Ethan seemed relaxed among the crowd, delivering a brief speech crediting the team's success. None of this would have been possible without our director of client relations, he concluded, his eyes finding Naomi's across the room. Later, as the party wound down, Naomi found a quiet corner overlooking the city lights. Ethan joined her, 2 water glasses in hand. Not celebrating? She asked, accepting the drink. I wanted a clear head, he replied. I've been meaning to discuss something with you. Her pulse quickened. A new project? In a manner of speaking. he set his glass down. The board is creating a new position, Chief Experience Officer, overseeing how clients and employees interact with Helix at every level. I'd like you to consider taking it. That's a C-suite position, she said, stunned. Yes, you'd report directly to the board, not to me. He met her eyes. That's intentional, understanding dawned. You're creating professional distance between us. I'm eliminating a power dynamic that has complicated things, he corrected. Because there are things I've wanted to say to you, Naomi, things that would be inappropriate while you're under my direct authority. The city sparkled below them as possibility unfolded between them. And what would you say? She asked carefully. If that complication were removed? I'd say that meeting you even under terrible circumstances changed everything. You reminded me why I built Helix in the first place. You challenged me to be better. His voice lowered. And I'd say that I think about you constantly, in ways that have nothing to do with quarterly reports. Naomi studied him, this brilliant, flawed man who had faced his mistakes and worked to correct them, who had seen her value when others dismissed it, who had gradually revealed a gentle humor and surprising warmth beneath his reserved exterior. The position comes with a substantial compensation package, he added with a hint of nervousness. But I understand if you need time, Ethan, she interrupted softly. Yes to the position. As for the rest, she took a deliberate step closer. I think we've both waited long enough. 3 months later, Naomi stood in a different corner office, surrounded by unpacked boxes. The CXO position had proven both challenging and rewarding. Her relationship with Ethan had unfolded slowly, deliberately. Weekend brunches with Zoe, quiet dinners discovering shared passions for historical documentaries and spicy food, conversations that stretched into the night. A knock at her door revealed Zoe and Ethan, carrying a small cake. We thought you needed an office warming, Zoe announced, setting it down with ceremonial importance. First month as CXO completed, Ethan said proudly. As they shared cake, Naomi reflected on the journey, from devastation to redemption to this unexpected happiness. What had begun with a wrongful termination had transformed into something neither she nor Ethan could have anticipated. A second chance not just at a career, but at connection, at trust, at possibility. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Relationships rarely were, especially ones with complicated beginnings. But standing there, watching Ethan laugh at Zoe's animated story, Naomi knew with certainty that some falls led not to ruin, but to rebirth. From professional shadows, they had both emerged into something brighter than either had imagined possible, a future built not on power or position, but on mutual respect, earned trust, and genuine affection that had grown in the most unexpected of circumstances.